That woman is not your real grandma. That was what she whispered to him, soft enough that no one else on the patio heard, but not soft enough to escape me. I was just behind the open window. I stood there holding a tray of lemonade frozen, listening to my daughter-in-law pour poison into my grandson's ear. My hands trembled. My chest tightened. I didn't walk out there. I turned quietly and shut myself in the downstairs bathroom. I locked the door, set the tray on the sink. Then I just sat on the closed toilet seat and shook. My fingers dug into my knees, and I cried. Not the kind of cry that's loud, the kind that breaks you slowly from the inside out. I was 63 years old, and I felt like I had been orphaned all over again. Let me know where you're listening from. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. And if this story speaks to you, share your thoughts below. Don't skip, because what happens at the end will surprise you more than the betrayal itself. I should have seen it coming. Maybe not those exact words, not so cruel and cold, but the signs were there. The cold shoulders, the missed calls, the carefully crafted invitations that always included her parents, her friends, but not me. I wanted to believe it was unintentional, that they were busy, that life was simply moving too fast. I wanted to believe my son wouldn't allow this to happen. But belief has limits, especially when it's bleeding. I stayed in that bathroom for almost 20 minutes, splashing cold water on my face, pressing a damp towel against my eyes so they wouldn't know I'd been crying, because I couldn't show them that they'd succeeded, that their words reached me, that her manipulation had cut me that deep. So I fixed my face, lifted that damn tray, and walked back outside with a smile I didn't feel. Lemonade, anyone I asked, cheerful. I set the glasses down on the table beside the Adirondack chairs. The lake behind them sparkled in the early evening light. My grandson, 7 years old, was sitting on the swing bench. He didn't meet my eyes. "Thanks, Mom," my son said without looking up from his phone. She smiled, that tight-lipped practice smile she wore like war paint. "Oh, none for me, thanks. I'm watching Sugar." Of course she was. I glanced at my grandson again. His lips were pressed together, his legs swinging idly. "You doing okay, sweetheart?" I asked him gently. He shrugged. "Mm-hmm." He wouldn't even say my name. They stayed for another 2 hours before packing up for the night. They had rented a cabin nearby saying they didn't want to invade my space. But that's not what it was. They wanted separation, a line in the sand. And she had drawn it deep, right through the middle of my heart. That night, after they left, I sat on the porch alone, listening to the crickets, watching the lake fade into darkness. The glass of untouched lemonade still sat beside me. I picked it up and drank it even though it was warm and bitter. My thoughts spiraled. I went back in time, trying to understand when it started, the change, the shift. How did I become that woman to a child I helped raise? How did I lose the right to the word grandma? It wasn't just a word. It was a life, a bond. I remembered the first time I held him, how he had been placed in my arms in the hospital pink and screaming, and how I'd whispered promises into his tiny ear. Promises I meant with every cell in my body, that I'd be there, that I'd protect him. But who was going to protect me? The next morning, I opened the drawer in my bedroom where I kept old letters cards and photographs. I pulled out the birthday card my grandson had given me 3 years ago. He'd drawn us holding hands. I was smiling. He'd written, "I love you, Grandma," in green crayon. I pressed the card to my chest and closed my eyes. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining this. Something had changed, something intentional. I spent the entire day alone. I didn't text them. I didn't call, and they didn't reach out. That's when I knew something had been set in motion long ago, and I had simply refused to see it. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, turned on the old answering machine out of habit. There was a message from the pharmacy, one from a telemarketer, and then one I had saved for years. My son's voice. He was younger, happier. "Hey, Mom. Just wanted to say thanks again for helping with the down payment. I don't know what we'd do without you. Love you." That was before she came into the picture, before she whispered poison. I didn't sleep well. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard those words again. That woman is not your real grandma. It didn't matter that I had changed his diapers, that I had rocked him to sleep, that I had made his Halloween costumes by hand. I was being erased, slowly, strategically, and with cruel precision. And what hurt the most was that my son let it happen. The next morning, I packed away the family photo wall, every frame, every memory. I put them in a large plastic container and sealed it tight. Not to throw away, but to reclaim, because I would not beg to be remembered. Something had broken inside me, but not in a way that left me weak, in a way that left me focused, cold, clear. I wasn't going to fight her with tears anymore. I was going to fight her with silence. I didn't always feel like this. Cold, hollow, walled off. There was a time when love poured out of me so easily, I could feel it warming the whole house, especially when it came to my son. His name was Daniel, born in the middle of January, in the middle of a snowstorm, and right in the middle of our little world falling apart. My husband had just been diagnosed with colon cancer. I remember walking into the hospital with one life slipping away from me and another beginning to grow inside. That winter was hard, brutal, but it made me strong. I didn't have a choice. My husband Michael held on for 8 months after Daniel was born. I remember the last thing he whispered before they gave him the morphine that took him away. "Raise him kind, Laura. Make him good." I did everything I could to live by that promise. We didn't have money, not after medical bills. I sold Michael's truck just to pay for diapers and formula. Took a night shift at the diner, then another cleaning office buildings before sunrise. My mother offered to help, but she was already sick herself. I told her to save her strength. I could do this. I would do this. And I did. Daniel was a sweet child. Quiet. Always observing. Always leaning into me when he didn't understand something. He hated loud noises. Loved trains. And he called me Mama longer than most kids do. Even when he was 5, he'd whisper it to me while we read bedtime stories. By the time he turned 10, we had found a rhythm. I worked days at the insurance agency and picked up weekend shifts at the library. He never went without, never missed a birthday cake or a school trip. I sacrificed everything, but I never once called it that. Because he was my reason. When he got accepted into college on partial scholarship, I sold my wedding ring to cover the gap. He cried when he found out, hugged me like he did when he was little, said, "I'll pay you back, Mom, every cent." I told him I didn't want cents. I wanted Sundays, phone calls, grandbabies one day, and his happiness. That's all. He met her his junior year. Her name was Lindsay. Pretty polished, polite. The kind of girl who always looked like she was heading to a meeting. At first I thought she was good for him. She straightened his collar, reminded him about interviews, cooked him quinoa and kale. He said she helped him feel focused. But there were small things, odd things, that I brushed off at first. She never let him talk too long on the phone with me. If I visited, she had just stepped out or was feeling under the weather. When I offered to help decorate their first apartment, she said, "We're keeping things minimal, but thank you." Always polite, always distant. When they announced they were pregnant, I cried. I sent her a handwritten letter the next day, just to tell her I was grateful she'd made Daniel so happy. I told her I'd always be there for their little one. I bought baby clothes, knitted blankets, dusted off the old crib from the attic. But none of it was wanted. She smiled and said thank you, but they already had everything handled. When my grandson Eli was born, I waited in the hallway for 3 hours. She wouldn't let anyone else in, only her mother. Daniel finally came out and handed me a photo. I didn't even get to hold him that day. But I smiled, took the picture, told him how beautiful Eli was. That night, I cried into a towel. For the first year, I only saw Eli through scheduled visits. Daniel said they were trying to maintain a routine, that they didn't want too many hands holding him or conflicting advice. I agreed. I wanted to be respectful. But every time I left, my chest ached with how unnatural it all felt. I started baking Eli's favorite cookies, chocolate chip with M&Ms, dropping them off in plastic containers, leaving little notes. At first, he loved them, called me Grandma Cookie. But slowly those visits became fewer. His drawings no longer included me. I noticed that. I tried to talk to Daniel about it once. "Hey," I said over the phone, "is everything okay? I feel like I'm losing touch." He was quiet for a moment. "Then Lindsay's been feeling a little overwhelmed. She thinks maybe we're overcomplicating things with too many different people giving input." "I'm not giving input," I said. "I'm just trying to love him." "I know, Mom." But that's all he said. He didn't say I was wrong, or that he'd talk to her. Just, "I know." After that, I stopped calling as much. I waited for them. I waited for birthdays, for holidays, for invitations. Most of the time, I spent those days alone, pretending it was fine, pretending I was just letting them live their life. But inside, I felt like wallpaper peeling off a wall no one looked at anymore. Still. When they invited me to the lake house that weekend, I thought maybe things were getting better. I packed Eli's favorite snacks, brought books, a little model train kit. I didn't expect everything to be perfect. I just wanted one evening, one moment, a piece of what we used to be. Instead, I got her whisper. "That woman is not your real grandma." A sentence that undid decades of love. A sentence that split my soul down the middle. It started small. That's how it always does, doesn't it? Not with a slap or a scream or some big dramatic blowout. No, betrayal is quieter than that. It creeps in with smiles and polite excuses, with missed calls and forgotten birthdays. It's in the way you get spoken to at dinner, the way your stories are politely ignored, how your name gets left off of group texts and travel plans. It's in the silence. After the lake house weekend, I expected a call, or at least a message. Something, maybe an apology, maybe an explanation, but nothing came. I spent the next 3 days pacing the house, waiting for the sound of Daniel's voice on the phone. I would have taken anything, even a half-hearted. "She didn't mean it that way, Mom." But all I got was silence. Eli didn't ask to video chat that week. I thought maybe he was confused. Maybe he was trying to figure out what he was supposed to believe. Children don't come up with words like, "not your real grandma," on their own. That kind of thing is planted. I remember staring at a framed photo of the 3 of us on Eli's 3rd birthday. I had made him a dinosaur cake, spent 6 hours getting the frosting right. He was on my lap, chocolate smeared across his cheeks, laughing. I held that photo in my hands for over an hour that night, just staring, just trying to remember what it felt like to matter. I didn't even realize how much I'd faded in their lives until I found out about Eli's school recital from a neighbor. Wasn't Eli great at that little Thanksgiving show she asked me at the market? I blinked. What show? She looked confused. Oh, I thought you were there. No, I wasn't. No one had told me. I went home that day and pulled out the calendar where I used to write down every visit, every phone call, every school event. The pages for that year were nearly blank. It wasn't an accident. It was a pattern, a deliberate, gradual erasure. I started noticing more things. Photos on Daniel and Lindsay's social media accounts, her parents were always there. Always smiling, always included. They were Nana and Pop Pop. They had matching Christmas pajamas, family portraits, even a little song they made up with Eli. And me, I was tagged in nothing, mentioned in nothing. Even my old nickname, Grandma Cookie, had disappeared. I wanted to confront them. I rehearsed the words in the mirror more times than I could count. But every time I picked up the phone, I froze. Because deep down, I already knew the truth. I was being replaced. Not because I had done something wrong. Not because I had failed. But because Lindsay wanted it that way. And Daniel, he let her. I remember one Sunday, I dropped off a care package at their doorstep, just like I used to. Cookies, a new book for Eli, a soft scarf I'd knit for Lindsay, even though it twisted my gut to do so. I waited in the car for a moment after I rang the bell. I just wanted to see them open it, see his little face light up. But Lindsay opened the door, looked down at the package, and nudged it inside with her foot. She didn't look around. She didn't wave. She just shut the door, and I sat there, engine running, blinking back tears. I didn't sleep that night. I kept hearing that phrase over and over again. Not your real grandma. It made me question everything. Was it because I wasn't Lindsay's idea of a proper grandmother? Because I didn't dress like her mother? Because I wasn't soft-spoken enough? Did she think my grief made me weak? That losing Michael made me vulnerable, easy to manipulate? Or was it something deeper? Did she feel threatened by how much Eli used to love me? Did she need control over everything, including the way her child saw the world I didn't know? But I knew one thing. This wasn't just coldness anymore. It was cruelty. I was being pushed out of my own family, and I needed to stop pretending it wasn't happening. Still, I wasn't ready for confrontation. Not yet. That wasn't going to help me. Not if I wanted to fix this, or at the very least protect myself. So I made a decision. I stopped calling. I stopped dropping off gifts. I stopped reaching out entirely. If they wanted distance, I'd give them exactly what they asked for. But I also started watching, carefully, quietly. Because if someone is bold enough to erase you from your grandson's life, what else are they willing to do? I wore the same smile for months. That tight, polite one. The one that says I'm fine really, even though something inside you is slowly going numb. It became my uniform, my armor. I smiled when people asked how the family was. Smiled when the cashier asked if I had grandkids. Smiled when neighbors mentioned seeing Eli at the park. I even smiled when I ran into Lindsay by accident at the pharmacy. She was with her mother buying vitamins or some such thing, and when she saw me, her face tightened, not with guilt, not with discomfort, but with calculation. "Laura," she said in that sugary tone. "Didn't expect to see you out so early." "Habit," I said, smiling. "I've always been up with the sun." Her mother looked me over like I was a dented can on a grocery shelf. "Well, we'd better get going," Lindsay said, already turning. "So much to do. No mention of Eli. No how are you. No goodbye." I smiled as they left. Didn't let it break. Not there, not then. But when I got home, I went straight to my study. Pulled out a fresh notebook. I wrote one sentence on the first page. If they want to make me a ghost, they'll regret forgetting how I used to haunt a place. That was the start of it. Not revenge. Not yet. But clarity. I went through every drawer in the house, pulled out old files, boxes of receipts, my husband's old documents, our estate records. I kept it all after Michael died. At the time, I didn't know why. I thought it was grief not being able to let go. But now, as I sorted through it all, I started to see patterns. When Daniel and Lindsay bought their home, I had helped with the down payment. $25,000. I remembered signing something Lindsay had insisted it was just a formality that she wanted everything in their names for mortgage reasons. At the time, I believed her. Now I found the document. It was neatly filed in a manila folder marked 2017. I read it carefully. Then again. Then a third time. My name was nowhere on it. I hadn't co-signed. I had donated. They hadn't just erased me from their lives. They had made sure I had no legal tether to anything I had helped build. I sat there in my study, the pages spread across the desk, my hands resting on the edges like I was holding the wings of something broken. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat still. Then I started making copies. Everything went into folders, receipts, checks, bank statements, email printouts, old texts. I started writing down dates, notable comments, all the times Lindsay said I didn't need to attend something, all the events I was left out of. I began reconstructing my own disappearance piece by piece. I was careful not to alert them. I still sent the occasional text. Happy birthday, thinking of you. Just enough to keep the peace. But I never called, never asked to visit. I waited, and as I waited, I watched. I created a new email, a new cloud folder, a digital copy of everything, backups on 2 flash drives, one hidden in the back of the kitchen drawer, the other under a loose floorboard in the bedroom closet. It wasn't paranoia, it was survival. Because I had begun to understand something. This wasn't just Lindsay's doing. Daniel was letting it happen, whether out of fear, weakness, or complicity. I didn't know. But he wasn't stopping it. And if he wasn't stopping it, that meant he was capable of more. Capable of letting me disappear. So I began preparing for the day they'd try to push me out completely. Legally, financially. Eli was growing fast. Soon there'd be college, a trust perhaps, and I knew something else. Michael had left something for him. A portion of our estate had been reserved in a sealed document. Michael had drawn it up before he passed. Back when Eli was just a dream. I never looked at it after the funeral. It had felt too far away. Now I pulled it out of the safe, read it line by line. It was exactly as I remembered. Michael's will had created a financial cushion, not just for Daniel, but specifically for any future grandchild. Held in my care until they turned 18. Lindsay didn't know. I was sure of that. Because if she did, she would have been playing this very differently. Suddenly, her behavior made more sense. The isolation, the control, the slow campaign to undermine me in Eli's eyes. If I was no longer seen as family, then anything I controlled might be called into question. But the law still recognized me, and Michael had been specific. That was when I stopped reacting. No more crying in the bathroom. No more pacing. From that point on, I planned. I made an appointment with a lawyer, an old friend of Michael's, someone I trusted. I brought everything, every file, every record, every note. He listened, quietly, carefully. Then he looked up at me and said, "You're right not to trust them. Let's put safeguards in place, and if they try anything, we'll be ready." I nodded. I left his office with a copy of every updated document. On the way home, I drove past their house. I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down. But I looked. At the porch where I used to sit with Eli. At the window where Daniel used to wave at me. They had rewritten me out of the story. But I had the original manuscript. and I was going to make sure they remembered that. They never knew what I knew. That was my power. That was what kept me steady every time I saw them in town or heard about another event I wasn't invited to. I smiled. I waved. I pretended I didn't mind, because I was already 5 moves ahead, and they had no idea. I started moving money, quietly, slowly. My name was still on one of the family accounts, one they hadn't paid attention to in years. It was where Michael had funneled a portion of our life insurance before he got sick. The balance had grown over time. No one asked about it. No one touched it. But I did. I set up a trust in Eli's name, my own trust separate from the one Michael created. One he wouldn't know about until he turned 21. Not 18, 21. I wanted him to be old enough to remember things, to ask the right questions. That same week, I updated my will, removed Daniel as my healthcare proxy, appointed my cousin Margaret instead. She was a retired nurse, tough as nails, loyal. Then I called the private investigator. I didn't know what I expected. I wasn't looking for something scandalous, but I wanted to be sure. If I was going to play this game, I needed to know the players. Her name was Janice. She was sharp, efficient, and discreet. I gave her Lindsay's full name, date of birth, and the address of their home. Be subtle, I told her. I'm not interested in destroying anyone. I just want the truth. Janice called me 2 weeks later. Her voice was clipped, direct. You were right to be cautious, she said. Your daughter-in-law has a few skeletons. She sent me the file by courier. When I opened it, my hands didn't shake. I was past that. What I found didn't shock me, just confirmed everything I had already felt. Lindsay had been sued twice. Once by a former employer for allegedly falsifying expense reports. Settled out of court. Once by a friend over a loan that went missing again, settled quietly. There were credit cards in her name I had never heard of. One of them maxed out less than 6 months ago. She wasn't as perfect as she wanted to seem. The real kicker, though, was the email. Janice had found an old message Lindsay had sent to a realtor dated shortly after I had helped them buy their house. She had inquired about putting the house solely in her name. Said she wanted to protect the property from outside family interests. Outside family interests. That was me. I closed the folder slowly. Then I picked up my phone. I texted Daniel. Hi, honey. Been thinking about you. Want to come by next Sunday for lunch? Just the 2 of us. He didn't reply right away. I knew he'd have to clear it with her. 3 hours later, I got his response. Daniel, sure. I'll let Lindsay know I'm swinging by alone. Swinging by? Like I was a drive-through. I still cooked like I used to. Roast chicken, garlic potatoes, honey carrots. His favorite. The house smelled like memory. I wore the apron Michael had bought me the first Christmas we spent in this house. I still kept it pressed in the linen drawer. Daniel showed up late. Hair disheveled, jacket half-zipped like he'd just rushed out the door. He hugged me, but it was the kind of hug you give a stranger you feel sorry for. Smells amazing, Mom, he said, forcing a smile. We sat, ate, talked around things. Then I brought out the tea, set down the cups. I looked him in the eye. Why did she say that to Eli? He blinked. Say what I didn't, repeat it. I just stared. He shifted, cleared his throat. I don't know what you heard. I heard her tell my grandson I'm not his real grandmother. His face hardened. She didn't mean it like that. How did she mean it then? He didn't answer. I leaned forward. I've supported you your entire life. I loved that boy from the moment he was born. I've never been anything but good to your family. He rubbed his forehead. Mom, things are complicated. Lindsay she wants boundaries, structure. No Daniel. She wants control. And you've given it to her. Silence. You know what Dad wanted? I asked, my voice low. He wanted you to be strong, to be kind. He didn't raise you to let people be erased. He looked away. I sat back. You're my son. I will always love you, but I won't let myself be used or discarded. Still, he said nothing. When he left, I stood at the window and watched him walk to his car. He didn't look back. That was the last time I invited him to the house. Because I didn't need confirmation anymore. I had all the pieces. The money, the files, the words, and a plan. They thought I was alone, weak, disposable. But what they didn't understand is that the quietest women remember the most. And when we remember enough, we stop waiting. We act. It started with a phone call I wasn't meant to hear. I was in the back room at the antique store where I volunteer twice a week helping sort through a box of estate china someone had donated. I had left my phone in my purse up front, but I heard the vibration against the wooden shelf. By the time I reached it, the call had gone to voicemail. The number was unfamiliar. I played the message. Hi, this is Karen from Wexler and Dean Family Law. We're following up on the asset consolidation inquiry you submitted for the Crawford Trust. We'll need written authorization from the administrator before we proceed. Please call us back. I stood there stunned. The Crawford Trust. That was Michael's estate trust. The one we created together years ago? The one I was still the sole administrator of. I hadn't submitted any inquiry. I called them back immediately. The receptionist asked me to verify my identity. I did. She pulled up the file. Yes, there was a request submitted online. Let me see here. She paused. It says Daniel Crawford requested to be added as co-administrator due to anticipated inheritance transfers. I nearly dropped the phone. I told her firmly that request was unauthorized. He has no legal standing over that trust. She sounded surprised. I understand. I'll flag the file and notify our compliance team. Thank you for letting us know. I thanked her and hung up. My hands were shaking. Not with fear, with fury. He had made his move, and I was done pretending. I drove straight home and pulled out my documents. Everything was still intact. My name, my authority. But now I knew Daniel had crossed a line. This wasn't about distance anymore, or hurt feelings. This was about power. He had tried to steal it, and he'd failed. But now, I needed to go further. I scheduled a meeting with my lawyer, Thomas. We sat in his office as I explained what had just happened. He frowned, flipping through the pages. They're getting desperate. I want to move the assets, I said calmly. All of them. Strip the old trust. Start fresh. Quietly. He nodded. We'll transfer everything into a private holding. Name the beneficiary directly. You'll have full control until Eli's of age. No one else can touch it. Not Daniel. Not Lindsay. Not even with a court order. Do it, I said. It took 4 weeks. During that time, I said nothing. Didn't call, didn't visit. But I kept track. I knew when Lindsay switched banks. When Daniel made inquiries about refinancing the house. They were sinking. Lindsay's old debts had resurfaced. That email I had uncovered, the one about putting the house solely in her name, Janice found a copy of the signed application. It had been denied, likely due to her credit. Daniel's job at the tech firm had taken a hit too. Rumors of downsizing. I watched them try to grip tighter as everything slipped, and I never said a word. I knew what would come next. The request, the soft, fake olive branch. And sure enough, it arrived. A text. Daniel. Hey, Mom. Just wondering if we could talk sometime soon. Lindsay and I would like to clear the air. I stared at that message for 5 full minutes. Then I replied. Me sure. Let's meet this Sunday. Just you and her. I chose the cafe downtown. Neutral ground. Public. They arrived together. Lindsay wore that same beige trench coat she always did when she wanted to look put together. Daniel looked tired. Thin. "Hi, Mom," he said, reaching to kiss my cheek. I pulled back slightly. "Let's sit." The waitress brought water. I ordered tea. They didn't order anything. So I said, resting my hands on the table, "You wanted to talk." Lindsay jumped in first. "We feel there's been a lot of misunderstanding lately. We just want to reconnect. For Eli's sake." I looked her dead in the eye. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" She blinked. "I'm not sure what you mean." "You tried to access Michael's trust. You tried to take control of something that doesn't belong to you." Daniel sat up. "Mom." "No, I cut him off. You listen. I know about your debts, Lindsay. I know about the job cuts, Daniel. I know about the documents you submitted, and I know about the lies." They both went pale. "I've moved everything," I said calmly. "You have no legal standing anymore. I've changed the structure, rewritten the trust. You are not part of it, and never will be." Daniel's face twisted. "You're punishing us, no. I'm protecting what's mine, and what your father built." Lindsay leaned in. "We're Eli's parents. You can't just, I said, and I have." Silence. "I gave you everything," I said softly, "and you fed me silence. You raised my grandson to believe I wasn't real, that I didn't matter." Daniel looked down. Lindsay clenched her jaw. "You've always been dramatic." I laughed once. "Quiet, bitter." "You're right. I was. I used to believe in fairy tales, in family, but I'm wide awake now." I stood. "Eli will find the truth on his own. He'll know who stood for him, and who stood in the way." Then I walked out. I didn't look back, because I didn't have to. The cracks were already there, and they were starting to show. He knocked on my door 3 days later. Daniel. Alone. I hadn't heard the knock at first because the kettle was whistling and I was humming, moving about the kitchen in my slippers. When I opened it, he stood there with his hands in his pockets the same way he used to when he was 14 and in trouble. But he wasn't 14 anymore. He was a grown man. And this time, the damage was deeper. I didn't say anything. I just opened the door wider, let him walk in. He stepped into the house like it was unfamiliar, even though it wasn't. He had taken his first steps on these floors, lost his first tooth on that couch, hidden birthday presents in the laundry room cabinet. But now he looked around like it belonged to someone else. "Thanks," he muttered. I poured us both some tea, sat across from him, waited. He sighed, running a hand down his face. "I don't know where to start." "Start where you stopped being honest." He looked up, startled. I didn't flinch. That would be a good place. He exhaled long and slow. She didn't mean it like that, Mom. The grandma thing, it was taken out of context." I sipped my tea. "No, Daniel, I heard it. All of it." His eyes darted to the window. He couldn't look at me. "You let it happen?" I said. "You let her erase me. You let her rewrite the family script and cast me out without protest." I was trying to keep the peace. "And what peace did that bring you?" He didn't answer. I leaned forward. "You came here for a reason, not to apologize. That would have come months ago." "So what is it?" He finally looked at me. "We're losing the house." I nodded slowly. "I figured." He swallowed. "The bank's giving us 90 days. Lindsay's talking about moving in with her parents until we get back on our feet. And we were wondering—" He paused, then backtracked. "I was wondering if we could stay here just for a while." There it was. Not because he missed me, not because he regretted the things he let slip away, but because they were desperate. I sat back in my chair. The silence stretched between us like a tightrope. "I can't help you," I said. He looked stunned. You won't even consider it? No. Why? Because you came here with a need, not with love. You came here because everything else fell apart. You didn't come here because you missed me, or because you're sorry. I am sorry, he said quickly. No, you're not. I stood. You let her tell my grandson I wasn't real. You didn't speak up. You didn't even flinch. That kind of silence doesn't come from confusion, Daniel. It comes from belief. He was quiet. She told him I wasn't his real grandma. I repeated, my voice cracking for the first time in weeks. Do you have any idea what that did to me? I was scared. He said finally. Of her. Of what she'd do. She controls everything. I didn't know how to fight her. You didn't have to fight her. You just had to remember who I was. The pain in his face shifted. It became something else. Something sadder. He looked at the teacup in his hands like he didn't recognize it. Eli's confused, he said softly. He asks about you, but we never know what to say. Say the truth. He looked at me. That I was there, I said. For every diaper, every bedtime, every Sunday visit. That I made him laugh. That I loved him so deeply it broke me when he stopped saying my name. Daniel's eyes welled. He wiped them quickly, like he was ashamed. I miss you, he whispered. I miss how things used to be. So do I said softer now. But they're not that way anymore. He stood brushing his hands against his jeans. If you change your mind, I won't. He nodded once, then turned, paused at the door. Would you ever want to see him again, Eli? My throat tightened. If he wants to see me, truly wants to. Not as a visit arranged by you. Not as a gesture. If he comes on his own, my door will always be open. He hesitated, nodded again, and left. When the door closed, I didn't cry. I just cleaned the dishes, scrubbed the cups, wiped down the table. Because the shame, the regret, it was finally his to carry. And mine to let go of. The next few weeks were quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes from peace, but the kind that follows after a long, drawn-out storm. There's a strange emptiness in that silence. Like the air's too still, too clean. I spent my days the same way I always did, early mornings with tea, walking the garden path, barefoot tending to the hydrangeas Michael had planted before his illness began. I dusted the bookshelves, rearranged the living room, cooked for myself, and I waited. Not for them, not for Daniel, not for Lindsay, but for Eli. I didn't expect him to come. Children believe what they're told. They believe the person who tucks them in every night. Who controls the narrative? I knew it would take time for that fog to lift, for memory to override manipulation. But even if he never came, I had made peace with what I'd done. I protected what was mine. I didn't destroy them. I simply removed myself from their game. And that kind of silence, that kind they weren't prepared for. It was early spring when the letter came. Not a text, not an email, a real letter. Folded in half and slipped into my mailbox with no return address. The handwriting was shaky, uneven, but familiar. It was Eli's. Dear Grandma, I don't know if you want to hear from me. Dad said maybe you're still upset, but I wanted to tell you I remember things. Not everything. But I remember your cookies, and the train set, and the big storybook about the fox and the moon. I remember the lake house. I remember crying after something Mom said, and you gave me a stuffed bear. You told me I didn't do anything wrong. I still have that bear. I miss you. Can I come see you sometime? Love, Eli. I read it twice, then a third time. And then I cried. Not the broken kind, not the bitter kind, but the kind of crying that only comes when something inside you finally exhales. I held that letter like it was made of glass, and I wrote back, "Dear Eli, thank you for remembering. I never stopped loving you. My door is always open. Come anytime. No expectations. No rules. Just you. Love, always, Grandma." I sent it the same day. Didn't text Daniel. Didn't notify anyone. 2 weeks passed. No reply. Then 3. I tried not to hope, but part of me still watched the driveway every afternoon. Then one Sunday morning, I was pruning the rose bushes out front when I heard footsteps on the gravel. I turned, and there he was. Taller now. Hair longer, shoulders still narrow with boyhood, but his face, it had grown. He stood there with his hands in his jacket pockets. "Hi, Grandma," he said. I couldn't speak. I just walked toward him slow and steady until he fell into my arms. He hugged me the way he used to, tight, like he didn't want to let go. "I wasn't supposed to come," he whispered, "but I did anyway." I pulled back, looked at his face. "You did the right thing." He followed me inside, looked around, smiled. "Looks the same." "I kept it that way," I said. "Just in case you remembered." I made him hot chocolate, with the marshmallows he used to like. He drank it in big gulps, told me about school, his friends, how he'd found my old Christmas cards in a drawer at home. "I asked about you," he said. "Mom said we grew apart." I raised an eyebrow. "She never really talks about you," he added. "But I remember. That night I let him stay over. Called Daniel, left a voicemail letting him know Eli was safe, but here by choice. He didn't call back. That was fine. This wasn't about him anymore. That evening, Eli and I sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Why did things get bad?" he asked softly. I looked out over the trees. "Sometimes grown-ups forget who they were," I said. "They start thinking love is something that has to be earned, or that it's something you can take away. But it's not, no, sweetheart. Love's not a contract. It's a memory, a promise, a choice." He nodded, rested his head on my shoulder. "I remember the cookies," he said. "They were the best." I smiled. "I still make them," I said. "Want to help me tomorrow?" "Yeah," he said. "I'd like that." We sat there until the stars came out, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like myself again. Not someone fighting to be remembered, but someone being seen. The court date came quietly. No one in town knew. No reporters, no family, not even Margaret. I kept it tucked away like a final stitch in a quilt that had taken years to finish. Thomas filed the motion to formally dissolve the shared rights Daniel had once assumed he'd inherit through the Crawford Trust. There were legal terms for it: revocation of contingent interest, fiduciary reallocation, and something about protective redrafting. But to me, it was simple. I was reclaiming the legacy Michael and I had built. We stood before the judge in a pale, wood-paneled courtroom that smelled faintly of old paper and air conditioning. Lindsay wore navy blue and sat stiffly behind her lawyer. Daniel sat beside her. He didn't look at me once. I didn't testify. I didn't need to. My documents did the talking. The trust Michael left for Eli was airtight, undisputable, uncontested. But the changes I had made to the additional accounts, the hidden trust I'd created, those were now legally sealed, protected under my sole discretion. Thomas stood calmly and precisely explaining how the attempted co-administrator request had been fraudulent, unauthorized. The judge listened, nodded, then made his ruling in under 20 minutes. Request denied. Control retained by original trustee. Case closed. Daniel didn't say a word afterward. Lindsay stood quickly grabbing her bag. Her expression was sharp, but there was a flicker of something behind it: panic. Because she knew it was over. Not just the money, the story. The story she'd spent years building. That they were the caretakers, the responsible ones, the true family stewards. Gone. I walked out of that courtroom lighter than I'd felt in years. Not because I'd won, because I had endured, because I hadn't stooped, because they had tried to erase me and failed. That night, I returned home to find Eli sitting on the porch swing, a book in his lap. He looked up when he heard my car pull in. "You okay?" he asked. I smiled. Better than okay. He held up the book. It was the old Fox and Moon story I used to read to him. The pages were frayed, the binding coming loose. "Found this on your shelf," he said. "You used to do the voices." I laughed. Oh, the fox had the most dramatic voice. He nodded, grinning. "You still remember it?" I sat beside him, took the book, and I read. The same way I had when he was 4. When he curled up next to me in his pajamas with sticky fingers from warm cookies. Only this time, he wasn't small. He was a young man leaning in to hear a voice from his childhood. A voice he had once been told wasn't real. When the story ended, he didn't say anything. He just stared up at the stars. Then quietly, "They're fighting a lot now." "Mom and Dad, I'm sorry," I said. "I think he's angry at her," Eli continued. "About what she did." I didn't respond. I let the silence do what it does best, fill in the truth between words. "She told me to stop talking to you," he said. I told her no. I looked at him. "That takes courage." He nodded. It didn't feel brave, just felt necessary. Sometimes that's the same thing. He stayed the night again, helped me make breakfast. We picked blueberries from the bushes out back and stirred them into pancakes. He laughed when I accidentally dropped an egg on the floor. "Still got your clumsy hands, Grandma." I grinned. "Watch it, or you'll be doing all the dishes." His laughter filled the kitchen. I didn't ask about Daniel. I didn't ask what Lindsay had said after the court decision. I didn't need to know. They had built something on lies and silence, and when it crumbled, it was not my job to carry their ruin. It was my job to tend what was left, to water what still grew, to make sure Eli never again questioned where he came from or who had loved him when no one else was watching. He stayed 3 nights that week. I gave him the spare room, washed the old sheets, set out his favorite blanket, the one with the trains. He laughed when he saw it. "You still have this?" "I have everything," I said. Because I did. Every crayon drawing, every homemade card, every photo. I never let any of it go, even when they told me to forget, even when they said I didn't matter. I held on, and now? He had come back. Not because I called him, but because the truth always finds its way home. After Eli left that Sunday evening, I sat in the quiet. No television, no music, just the creak of the porch swing and the low buzz of summer air drifting in through the open windows. The silence felt different now, not empty, not heavy. It felt full. Full of everything I'd survived. Full of everything I'd let go of. I stood up slowly and walked through the house, room by room, touching memories with my fingertips. The doorknob in the hallway that still had a faint chip from when Daniel ran into it with his tricycle. The corner of the stair where Michael always paused without fail to tie his shoes before heading out. The drawer in the kitchen where I used to hide little notes in Eli's lunchbox. Everywhere I turned, I was surrounded by what was real. Not perfect, but real. And I had fought for it silently, relentlessly, without screaming or slamming doors. I fought with patience, with evidence, with restraint, and with love. It was time to take the final step. The cottage I'd dreamed about for years, a small coastal place with creaky floors and a wraparound porch, had been sitting on the real estate listings for 3 months. I called the agent the next morning, told her I'd like to see it. I drove down the coast alone. No music, just the rhythm of the tires on the road and the quiet hum of my thoughts. The house was everything I wanted. Pale gray with white shutters. A garden half wild with lavender and sage. A fireplace in the corner of the main room, and a view of the ocean from the back porch that made my breath catch. I made an offer on the spot. It was accepted 2 days later. I didn't tell Daniel. I didn't tell Lindsay. I didn't owe them that. Instead, I began sorting through the house. One box at a time. The family photos, I kept the ones where Eli was laughing. The ones where I saw myself in his eyes. Daniel's old trophies drawings, notes. I wrapped them carefully, but I didn't label them. If he ever wanted them, he could ask. The rest, old towels, furniture with splinters, books I hadn't touched in years, I donated or tossed. I wanted to travel light. When I told Eli I was moving, he asked if he could help. He showed up in cargo shorts and sneakers, lifting boxes, vacuuming behind furniture. He even climbed up into the attic for me. "Don't fall," I warned. "I'm young," he laughed. "My bones bounce." He found a tin box up there, covered in dust. He brought it down and handed it to me. "Looks like treasure," he said. I opened it slowly. Inside were letters Michael had written before he passed. I'd forgotten they were there. One was addressed to me. One was addressed to Daniel. And one, still sealed, was addressed to my future grandchild, if you ever wonder. I held that letter in my hands a long time. Then I gave it to Eli. His eyes widened. "You sure he wrote it for you?" I said. "I think it's time." He opened it slowly, read in silence. Then tears filled his eyes. "He knew me," he whispered. "Even before I was born. He loved you," I said. Even before there was a name to put to the feeling. We didn't talk much after that. We just sat there side by side in the living room that was half packed and half memory. I moved into the cottage a week later. The first night, I sat on the back porch with a blanket around my shoulders and a cup of chamomile tea. I watched the moon rise over the ocean, and I breathed, no tension in my chest, no waiting for someone to call, no checking the phone for messages that would never come. Just me, just peace. I received one text from Daniel after I moved. "Daniel, I heard you sold the house. Hope you're well." I didn't reply. There was nothing else to say. I hadn't done this to hurt him. I had done this to heal myself. And some people will never understand the difference. Eli visited once a month, sometimes twice. He helped me paint the guest room, cooked dinner with me, brought me his high school poetry journal, and let me read his awkward rhymes. He asked hard questions sometimes. "Do you think Dad ever really saw what he was doing? Do you think Mom believed her own lies?" I never pretended to have the answers, but I always told the truth. "I don't know," I said, "but sometimes people tell themselves stories so they can live with what they've done. Doesn't make it right, just makes it familiar." He nodded. Sometimes that was enough. One evening, as the waves crashed gently and the sun melted into the sea, Eli turned to me and said, "You bought your freedom with silence." I looked at him, surprised. He smiled. "That's what Dad said. One night, he was angry. Said you erased yourself so you could rewrite everything." I didn't respond, but inside, I smiled, because he wasn't wrong. I didn't win by screaming. I won by surviving, by reclaiming, by choosing myself. It was almost a full year after I moved that I received the second letter. I'd just finished my morning walk along the shore, the hem of my linen pants still damp from the waves that lapped too high. The mailbox sat on a crooked wooden post just past the stone gate. I wasn't expecting anything. Bills, maybe. A local flyer. But there it was, a small ivory envelope with my full name written in Daniel's handwriting. I knew it instantly. Inside a letter. No grand opening. No greeting. Just 5 words, I don't know who I am. The rest was scribbled, scattered clumsy. Apologies mixed with confusion. Regret inked beside justifications. He wrote about how everything had felt like a blur over the past 2 years, that he hadn't realized how far things had fallen until the silence was too loud to ignore. He wrote that Eli barely spoke to him anymore, that Lindsay had filed for a trial separation, that their finances were unraveling, and that now, too late, he was starting to see it all clearly. But what struck me most wasn't the remorse. It was the sentence near the bottom. I see him clinging to you now the way I used to, and I can't figure out when I stopped thinking you were my home. I folded the letter slowly, held it against my chest, and I didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because there was nothing left to mourn. Daniel had made his choices. I had made mine. That evening, I sat with Eli on the back porch. He'd come to visit for the weekend. He was 17 now. Taller than me, voice deepening, still called me Grandma like it was a sacred word. He noticed the letter beside my teacup. Is that from him? Yes, I said. Are you going to answer? I don't think so. He was quiet a moment. Then softly, I wouldn't either. We watched the sky turn violet, the moon rising slow and low over the waves. I remember when he used to throw me in the lake, Eli said suddenly. Back when we'd all go to the cabin. I smiled. He loved that place. He wasn't always like this, right? No, I said. But people don't usually change all at once. They drift, like a boat that forgets where the shore is. He nodded slowly. Do you miss him? He asked. I thought about that. Let the silence answer first. I miss the version of him that still knew how to love without conditions. But I don't miss the man who stood by and watched me disappear. Eli looked down at his hands. I think I used to believe them when they said you were too much, too involved. I glanced at him. And then one day he continued, I realized I couldn't remember a single time you made me feel small. I reached over, touched his hand. I never would. He looked at me. I know that now. That night, I pulled out the locked box I kept in the bedroom closet. Inside were old photographs, deeds, the sealed court documents, and my original will. I set it on the desk. Then I opened a blank one, fresh, untouched. I started from scratch. This time, it named Eli as the sole beneficiary, not just of the hidden trust, but of the estate, the cottage, the copyrights to Michael's journal entries I had been preserving for years. Daniel's name didn't appear once. I left a letter with the new documents, not to justify, not to scold, but to explain, this is not revenge, this is clarity. You chose silence, and I chose truth. The next morning, I emailed Thomas and asked him to file the changes. He didn't ask why. He didn't need to. Eli left later that day, but not before writing a note and tucking it under the sugar bowl. I found it that evening. I remember you. I never stopped. 5 words. They healed things that years of waiting never could. After that, I settled into a rhythm. The ocean became my timekeeper. The birds my alarm clock. I grew herbs on the windowsill. I mailed out holiday cards to people who had stayed. People who mattered. Daniel didn't write again. Lindsay didn't either. Eventually, I heard through Margaret that their house was sold and that Lindsay had moved to her sister's in Vermont. Daniel stayed behind in a rented apartment. Eli didn't visit him often. He didn't have to. He had his anchor here. One evening, I found Eli sitting in the study, flipping through Michael's journal. He looked up, eyes bright. Grandpa was funny, he said. Oh, he had the driest sense of humor. You get that from him. I think I'm going to write about him. Maybe for my college essay. I felt my throat tighten. He'd love that. Eli smiled. He already does. And for the first time since Michael died, I felt something in my chest unlock. Not because everything had been fixed, but because something true had survived. He came back alone. No bag, no car keys jangling. Just him walking down the dirt path in the golden dusklight like it was the most natural thing in the world. I was trimming the lavender when I saw him. I looked up, and for a moment I thought I was seeing a memory. But there he was, Eli, taller, shoulders broader, 17 going on forever. I set the clippers down, wiped my hands on my apron, and waited for him to speak first. "I didn't tell them I was coming," he said. "Good," I said. "That makes two of us." He smiled, but it was a tired smile, not sad, just stretched thin. We sat on the porch. I poured lemonade. He drank it slowly like it held answers. "I had a fight with him," he said after a long silence. "With Dad. I didn't ask why." I waited. He told me I needed to stop pretending, that you weren't who I thought you were. He stared at the glass. He said you manipulated everything, that you made him and Mom feel like outsiders in their own family. I let out a breath through my nose. Not surprise, just grief in a different outfit. "And what did you say I asked?" I told him I remember who packed my lunch when they forgot, who drove me to soccer when he was busy, who held me when I cried at the lake house after Mom snapped at me. His hands curled into fists around the glass. I told him the only person who ever made me feel like I was enough was you. My hand reached across the table before I even thought about it. I touched his wrist, just a brush of my fingers. Sometimes I said truth is quiet, and people mistake quiet for weakness. "He doesn't listen," Eli said. "He just shuts down, says I've been poisoned by you." I laughed. Quiet, dry. That's ironic. He nodded. "I don't want to go back." "You don't have to," I said. "Not today. Not ever if you don't want to." "I'm almost 18. I tilted my head. "Almost doesn't protect you legally." He looked up, searching my face. "Would you ever let me stay?" The words were soft, hopeful, hesitant. I didn't answer right away. I stood, walked into the house, into the back room where Michael's old army trunk sat under the window. I opened it. Inside was a key. I brought it back to him and set it on the table. "This opens the guest cottage in the back," I said. "It's small, needs cleaning, but it's yours if you want it." He stared at the key. Really, I've been waiting to give it to someone who deserved it. He didn't cry, but his eyes shimmered with something I hadn't seen in a long time: relief. The next morning, we cleaned it together. Swept out the cobwebs, dusted the windows, scrubbed the sink. He carried in a box of books, set up his laptop on the small desk, hung one photo us at the beach 2 summers ago. He didn't ask for anything more. Didn't ask to be taken care of, just to be accepted. I told Margaret about it a few days later. She was the only one I trusted with things like this. "He's a good boy," she said. "He always was. Just had to remember who to listen to, and who to stop listening to." I added. "Daniel called that evening. Left a voicemail. I know he's with you. I know you think you've won, but you haven't. He'll see through you eventually. They all do." I saved the message, not for revenge, not for proof, but as a reminder of who he chose to be and who I no longer needed to explain myself to. Eli enrolled in community college 2 towns over, got a part-time job at the bookstore near the pier, paid his share of utilities even though I never asked. He cooked sometimes, cleaned, came in late, and always left a note. We didn't live like roommates. We lived like survivors. One night, over a pot of soup and the hum of the radio, he said something I'll never forget. I used to think love had to be loud, like yelling across a room to get someone's attention. And now I think love is just showing up, quiet, constant. Like you did. I looked at him. Like you do now. He smiled. Daniel didn't call again. Lindsay sent a holiday card unsigned. I threw it in the fireplace. Not out of spite, out of finality. I didn't need their words. I had built something stronger. And that something sat across from me now, spooning soup, talking about a book he'd read, the waves crashing softly behind him. I didn't know what the future held. But I knew this, no matter what they tried to take. They never took him. Not really. He came back alone. And he stayed. The final entry in my journal wasn't long, just a single page. I wrote it the morning after Eli turned 18. The cottage was still quiet. He was sleeping in something he rarely did anymore, with classes and work and responsibilities that made his face sharper, his voice firmer. But that morning, he rested. He had earned it. We both had. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd once cried into my tea, where I'd read Michael's letters, where I'd first opened Eli's shaky handwriting, asking if he could come see me. The light poured through the window in golden ribbons, catching the steam rising from my mug. I took my pen, opened the leather-bound journal, and wrote, "I closed the book myself." Because that's what this was. An ending. Not sad, not bitter, just complete. I had spent too long waiting for someone else to give me closure. Waiting for Daniel to come back the way he used to be. Waiting for Lindsay to apologize. Waiting for my grandson to remember who I really was. But now, I didn't need any of them to understand what I had done. Because Eli understood. And that was enough. He came into the kitchen just as I was finishing. Hair a mess, wearing the sweatshirt I'd bought him 4 birthdays ago. "You writing again?" he asked, eyes still heavy with sleep. "Just finishing something." He poured himself coffee. Sat across from me. "You gonna let me read that someday?" Maybe I smiled. "If you promise to read slow." He grinned. "I always do." Later that day, we went to the notary together. I gave him the sealed letter Michael had written, the second copy I'd kept safe for 18 years. He read it aloud in the car. His hands didn't shake. His voice didn't break. But tears ran down his cheeks as he said the final line. "You'll always have a place with us wherever we are, especially with her." He looked at me then, and I swear I saw something pass through his face. Recognition, yes, but also certainty. He knew. He knew everything now. A few weeks later, I made a final visit to the city. I stood outside the office building where Daniel worked, at least the one where he had once worked before the layoffs. I didn't go inside. I just dropped off an envelope with the receptionist. Inside, it was a single piece of paper. No threats, no accusations, just a letter. The truth outlasts silence. "You didn't lose me. You gave me away." I never heard from him again, and I didn't need to. Because the story I wanted to live, the one that mattered, was already unfolding beside me every single day. Eli thrived. He published a short story in a local journal. He worked at the bookstore. He played guitar in a small weekend band and gave me headaches with his awful garage rehearsals. He also brought me tea when I was tired, took my arm when we walked on icy paths. He made jokes about my bad hearing and called me Gran when he wanted something. We fought sometimes, but we always talked. Always. When people asked, I told them he was my grandson. But really, he was more than that. He was my second chance. He made me real again. One day, I gave him the old cottage key and told him it would be his someday. He said, "It already is." We planted a tree out back together, a lemon tree. He said it was for new beginnings. I told him that was a little poetic for someone who once stapled his own hand trying to fix a binder. He laughed. People change. I nodded. They do. Some for the better. As for me, I stayed in the cottage, among the books and the wind and the waves. I never remarried. I never looked back. But I smiled more, a lot more. And in the final paragraph of my journal, I wrote this: when I was forgotten, I learned to remember myself. When I was erased, I rewrote. And when they walked away, I walked forward. So if you're listening now and someone has tried to make you feel like you don't belong, like you're too much or too little or not enough in just the right ways, I want you to remember this. They can only erase you if you put down the pen. Don't. Write your ending. Write your name in bold, because I did. And in the end, that changed everything.